Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, Chapter 20, The Third Flight of Beelzebub to the Planet Earth. After a brief pause, Beelzebub continued to speak further as follows. This time, I remained at home, that is, on the planet Mars, only a short while, just long enough to see and talk with those who had newly arrived and to give certain directions of a common tribal character. Having disposed of the said affairs, I descended again to your planet with the intention of continuing the pursuit of my aim, that is, the uprooting among these three-centered beings of their terrifying custom of doing as it were divine work by destroying the existence of beings of other brain systems. On this third descent of mine to the planet Earth, our ship Occasion did not alight on the sea Kolhidios, which is now called their Caspian Sea, but on the sea called at that period the Sea of Beneficence. We decided to alight on this sea because I wished this time to go to the capital of the beings of the second group of the continent Ashark, then named the city Gob, which was situated on the southeastern shore of that sea. At that time, the city Gob was already a large city and was well known over the whole planet for its production of the best fabrics and the best what are called precious ornaments. The city Gob was situated on both banks of the mouth of a large river called the Keria Chi, which flowed into the Sea of Beneficence, and which had its rise in the eastern heights of this country. In this Sea of Beneficence, on its western side, another large river flowed called the Naria Chi, and it was in the valleys of these two large rivers that the beings of the second group of the continent Ashark chiefly existed. If you wish, my dear boy, I shall also tell you a little of the history of the rise of this group of beings of the continent Ashark, Beelzebub said to Hassan. Yes, grandfather, yes, I shall listen to you with great interest and much gratitude, replied his grandson. Then Beelzebub began. A long, long time before that period to which my present tale relates, namely, long before that second great catastrophe to that ill-fated planet, while the continent Atlantis was still existing, and at the height of its splendor, one of the ordinary three-centered beings of that continent invented, as my latest detailed investigations and researches cleared up, that the powdered horn of a being of that particular exterior form, then called a Pirmaral, was very effective against what they call diseases of every kind. His invention was afterwards widely spread by various freaks on your planet, and also there was gradually crystallized in the reason of ordinary beings there an illusory directing factor, from which, by the way, there is formed in the whole of the presence of each of your favorites, especially of the contemporary ones, the reason of what is called their waking existence, which factor is the chief cause of the frequent change in convictions accumulated in them. Owing to just this factor, crystallized in the presences of the three-brained beings of your planet of that period, it became the rule that everyone, as they say, who fell ill of some disease or other, invariably had to be given this powdered horn to swallow. It is not without interest to remark that Pirmarals breed here at the present time also, but since contemporary beings take them merely for one of the species of being they collectively call deer, they have no special name for them. So, my boy, as the beings of the continent Atlantis destroyed very many beings of that form for the sake of these horns, they very soon became extinct. Then a number of beings of that continent, who by this time already made a profession of hunting these beings, went hunting for them on other continents and islands. This hunting was very difficult because for the capture of these pirmarals, a great many of these hunter beings were required. So these professional hunters always took their whole families with them for assistance. Once, several of these hunter families joined together and set off to hunt the pirmarals on a very remote continent then called Iranan, which later, after having been changed owing to the second catastrophe, was called the continent Ashark. This was the same continent your contemporary favorites now call Asia. For my further tales concerning the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, it will be very useful for you, I think, if I emphasize here that on account of various disturbances during the second terrestrial catastrophe, several parts of the continent Iranan entered within the planet, and other terra firmas emerged in their place and attached themselves to this continent, which in consequence became considerably changed, and became in size almost what the continent Atlantis had been for the planet Earth before the catastrophe. Well then, my boy, while this said group of hunters were once with their families pursuing a herd of these pirmarals, they reached the shores of the water space, which was later called the Sea of Beneficence. Both the sea itself and its rich and fertile shores so greatly pleased this group of hunters that they did not wish to return to the continent Atlantis, and from that time on they remained to exist there on those shores. That country was at that time indeed so excellent and so subtaninalnian for ordinary being existence, that no being who could think at all could help liking it. On that terra firma part of the surface of your planet, not only did there exist at that period multitudes of two-brained beings of the said exterior form, namely pirmarals, but around this water space were also multitudes of various kinds of fruit trees, whose fruit then still served for your favorites as the principal product for their first being food. There were then also so many of the one-brained and two-brained beings which your favorites call birds, that when they flew in droves it became, as your favorites say, quite dark. The water space, situated in the middle of that country and then named the Sea of Beneficence, so abounded with fish that they could almost be caught, as they also say, with one's bare hands. And for the soil of the shores of the Sea of Beneficence, and also of the valleys of the two large rivers flowing into it, any part of them could be adapted for growing anything you like. In short, both the climate of this country and everything else so delighted the hunters and their families that none of them, as I've already said, had any desire to return to the continent Atlantis. And from that time on they remained there, and soon, adapting themselves to everything, multiplied and existed, as is said, on a bed of roses. At this place in my tale I must tell you about an extraordinary coincidence which later had great consequences